Hi, I'm Rob, and welcome to Late Empire. Today we're going to be talking about The Expanse. Now, Season 4 of The Expanse just dropped a few weeks ago, and I'm actually going to do 3 videos where I'm talking about the 3 different factions in the Expanse universe, or at least the 3 different factions before the ring gates are opened. And it's Earth, Mars, and the Belt. Today I'm going to talk about Earth, which is the birthplace of civilization, and it is by far the most heavily populated part of the solar system. In fact, in the Expanse universe, the Earth has 30 billion people. To be honest, I don't think the population of Earth will ever get to 30 billion, but nonetheless, in the Expanse, that is the population, and that population, in conjunction with a presumed ecological catastrophe in the past, led to the Earth being ruled by a single government, the United Nations, in fact. It is divided into what are called shared interest zones, many of which correspond to old countries or regions of the Earth, but it is a single government, and it is theoretically, it's a democratically elected government. We did see an election occur in Season 4 of the Expanse TV series, with Nancy Gao becoming Secretary General. But the portion of the population that can actually vote for the Secretary General is pretty limited. And in fact, if you think the Earth is screwed up in today's world, in the Expanse, it is just in a different category of crazy. Basically, with this single government, they have divided the population into 2 main parts. You have essentially what is the productive part of the economy, and you have people that are on basic. And the people that are on basic are between 1/2 and 2/3 of the population. And it's essentially a coerced, non-work situation where the people that are on basic, they can't work, they can't go to school, they can't have kids, they can't vote, they can't move up into the category of people that are not on basic, or at least it's very difficult. And essentially the rationale that's given is that there are too many people for the available jobs. Now, Economics 101 says that that statement is kind of BS. The more people you have, the more needs there are to be met. The more desires there are, the market is that much bigger for businesses. And the real reason most likely has to do with trying to suppress a part of the population and essentially, make them disappear over time, to minimize overuse of resources. So I'm sure that's really the rationale. It's not really a matter of available jobs. One thing about this system that's in place, it really reminds me of the hukou system in China, in the People's Republic of China today. In China, if you are classified as a rural resident or you're classified as an urban resident, your social benefits are completely different depending on what category you were born into. If you are, and the reason they did this is because China has such a huge population that no communist or socialist government can actually provide those services for that entire population. So by staying within the realm of reality, what they did was they said, okay, urban population, we're going to provide you education, we're going to provide you health care, the normal things that we expect socialist societies to try and provide. But if you're a rural resident of China, if you're in that hukou, you're kind of on your own. And even if you are a rural resident and you move into the city to get a job at Foxconn or some other, making iPhones or something like that, you're not going to get those benefits that the urban residents get. So even though you're living in the city, things like education and healthcare are out of pocket. On top of that, you have a one-child policy. So, well, you had a one-child policy. So you've got population control going on. All this, the way Earth is in the Expanse really reminds me of the People's Republic of China in a lot of ways. Now, if you are on BASIC, and an example of someone who lived in that world would be Amos. If you're on BASIC, because you can't have, there are some that will have children, but that's illegal, and those children actually would be unregistered. But because you can't have children, you can't have a job, you can't get educated, you're basically looking at the breakdown of family structures. You're looking at high crime, you're looking at high suicide rates. Now, from cold-hearted calculations of the central government, that some of that's probably not a bad thing, because they want population control and reduction is what they're really going for. And if you can't have kids, that's a generation of people that just disappear. Actually, in that respect, I'm actually surprised that the population is still 30 billion, because if over half of your population can't have kids, sure, some are going to have kids illicitly, but if by and large they're not having children, that population is going to drop pretty quick. But regardless, it's a very unstable system. And obviously, people on BASIC can't vote, because no one would vote for that kind of situation. So it's your haves and your have-nots. If you are in the haves category, you're living like you're in a nice, democratically elected society with plenty of employment, educational opportunities, high technology, you name it. But if you're a have-not, like if you're living on BASIC, it's probably a pretty primitive existence. But like I said, it's a very unstable system. There's a massive waste of talent. If you're looking at a minimum of 15 billion people that are on BASIC, it's more than 15 actually, because it is a majority of the population. Think of how many Einsteins are in that population, and they will never have a chance to get a job. Never have a chance to go to university. That's a huge population with massive potential that's just literally being eliminated. Waste of talent, minority rule, destruction of family structures. That is a recipe for a very unstable system. Now, when the rocks fall, obviously the population of Earth is a lot smaller, but I have in my opinion, if the rocks didn't fall, that system is going to fall, because it just can't continue. That's not the kind of political and economic system that can sustain itself over a long period of time, not without harsh coercion from the government. The other thing, too, is a lot of the population control measures, as China discovered, and it's why they don't have the one-child policy anymore, is the demographic shifts that it creates are extremely burdensome. You end up with a rapidly aging population. The lower your birth rate is, the worse that aging is. And you pile on top of that the fact that life expectancies are longer in the world of the Expanse, and that's a recipe for Earth being like 50% elderly people. And really that creates more of a burden on those people that are working. So in a lot of ways, with population control measures and the division of the population into these two camps, is a lot like how the People's Republic of China operates. Another kind of thing that came up, and the TV series isn't there yet, but it came up when the rocks fell on Earth, and the power grids were just annihilated because they used a lot of solar and wind power. And I thought this was absolutely crazy because clearly in the Expanse universe, fusion power is plentiful. You have little rock hoppers out in the belt that have fusion drives. And if, relatively impoverished people out in the belt can have fusion reactors, fusion power should be widespread on a planet like Earth. And it was shocking to me that these solar and wind power based grids were falling apart because of all the dust, the overcast from the impacts. And I just kept thinking to myself when I read that, I was like, there should be fusion reactors around every block that aren't going to be affected by that. And they should be able to, power should be plentiful even in a situation like that. Obviously, if it's a kinetically impacted area, it's a different story. But, for the rest of the globe, there should be plenty of power available for hospitals and hydroponics and all kinds of stuff. But because they were using a lot of solar and wind, it had a devastating effect on everything. And, to me, if I had fusion power that plentiful, solar and wind are the first things to go, especially with a population of 30 billion people. Because solar and wind are low-density power sources that are intermittent, and they take up a lot of land. And if they're taking up tons of land to generate power, and you have a massively overpopulated planet, those things don't mix. Now, because it is kind of a top-down, centralized authoritarian government, maybe it's just the fact that governments usually don't make very good decisions, and B, there may be, lobbies or interest groups of people in the solar and wind community which kept those things alive, even though they're way past their usefulness. If I had fusion power available on that scale, like I said, solar and wind are the first things to go. Then the dirty power production, then fission nuclear reactors, then I would actually start getting rid of some of the hydro, because that'll help the environment too, allow salmon runs to go further upriver than they do when the rivers are dammed up. Obviously, you have to keep some dams for irrigation water and stuff, but I presume that the CO2 level's higher during that time period, so, plants and crops require less water than they do, on Earth today or 50 years ago. So, there's a lot of, just fusion. That's the best power source. I don't know why they weren't using it. But seeing the dysfunction of the society and the government, maybe it's not so surprising. Now, if you are in the haves, if you're in the residential group that can have jobs, can get educated, can vote, having children is still highly restricted. Children are very heavily taxed. And one interesting thing that comes up is the rise of communal marriages. You see this in actually multiple points in the books. The books will go into character development of secondary characters much more than the TV series will. And so you see, communal marriages in various places. And this would be something that the government would encourage. And because the technology allows transmission of DNA to your children from multiple parents or from, alternative family structures of any kind, you have a case like Jim Holden where he's got 8 parents and then he was the only child. Now, that kind of ultra low birth rate, that will definitely, reduce the population. As I said before, that will create some serious demographic shifts as well. For example, if you look at Jim Holden and his family, he's the one relatively young person, and then it's 8 old people. And so think about the burden of one person who has to take care of 8 older people. Whether it's a burden on the tax base or a personal burden. So you have these alternative family structures, and communal marriages have cropped up more than once in the book series for sure. And it's a population control measure. That's kind of an interesting way of trying to deal with the situation as well. One thing I was always wondering, because there are so many people that are on basic, if Mars wants talent, if they want to keep recruiting talent, man, that's billions of people who have no chance at doing anything on Earth, and they could be the next Einstein. And I could see Mars easily poaching some top talent of people who will never make it, the way Earth is structured. In season 4, when they're talking about Nancy Gao and what the percentages of people who are on basic and able to make that transition to getting an education and getting into the workforce, it's tiny. It's a fraction of the people who could get into Harvard or Stanford or Yale. So you're looking at literally some of the top, most talented humans, and they're stuck on basic, not even able to have kids. They can't even pass on this high IQ DNA. So, it's really kind of tragic in a lot of ways. I find Earth, of the 3 main factions, Earth is easily the most authoritarian of the 3 factions. And because you have to be authoritarian to have a system like that persist. It doesn't happen out of free will. And, so you have this authoritarian planet, and yeah, it creates a really interesting dynamic. It does have some of the strongest leaders, people like Avasarala, who really, know what they're doing and can deal with very stressful circumstances. But she's in that haves category. In fact, she's in the top, the most elite of that haves category. So yeah, it's really interesting though. It's a good exercise in, hey, if we give people what they say should happen in order to save the Earth, this is what results. It's a really good exercise in seeing what ends up happening. And so yeah, it's really cool. Now, you also have Luna, which is the moon. That does fall under the United Nations. It actually has a population of about 1 billion. And I won't talk about that one too much, simply because actually there's a lot of the social structures I really don't know about with the moon. For example, does that Huko type system exist on the moon? The moon has a smaller population. I presume that it is more gainfully employed than people on Earth, but I don't really know. As an aside, one of the cool things that was mentioned in the books was one of the first things when we colonized the moon was the construction of a broad array telescope on the moon. And, in real life, to me, that's the number one reason to go back to the moon, is to build a humongous broad array telescope there. You build a big enough telescope on the moon, you could image planets in other star systems, because it just makes Hubble and James Webb telescopes look like nothing. So, that to me, that's one of the biggest benefits, immediate benefits of going to the moon, is the ability to put something like that up there. Plus helium-3 for fusion reactors too. But yeah, so The moon isn't quite as fleshed out. Now, in the books, the moon ends up taking a lot of refugees when the rocks fall on Earth. But obviously, the moon is not, it has no atmosphere. It's just a barren rock. You're pretty limited in what kind of population you can take on board in that situation. But yeah, so hey, feel free to put comments down there. I'm sure there's things that I missed. I've read the first 7 books and then the 4 seasons of the TV series, and there may be things I just totally didn't even pick up on. But just me looking at, what I have seen and read about in the situation with Earth, and as we'll see later with Mars and the belt, that's sort of my take on what Earth is like in the Expanse universe. So feel free to put comments down. I'm always looking for information. If people want to, if they read something or saw something on a TV series that may be more enlightening with what I put out, feel free to let me know, and we'll come back at you with another video. This time it'll be about Mars. So we'll talk to you later.